Hey, what's this? The buyer's coming back and asking for repairs and for money off on the thing? I thought this was an as is contract. Well, that's a question that I get asked a lot. Hi, I'm Chuck Vosberg from Next Home, along with my wife Pat, your favorite realtors. I'd say one of the most common questions we get asked during a real estate transaction is what exactly does as is mean? Now, I want to preface this by telling you I am not a lawyer. I'm not qualified to answer legal questions. If you have questions about what your contract means, you should contact a lawyer. And I'm going to give you my personal advice, just practical advice from a realtor's point of view of how these things work in a real estate transaction. The first thing we're going to talk about is the as-is contract. It's the most common contract that's used here in our part of Florida, and it's also known as a FAR for Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar. Those are the two organizations that got together and created this contract. It's 12 pages long. It's a great contract. It's very easy to understand, and it really does a great job of being fair and also really protecting the consumer. So it says as is right on the top. So a lot of times people kind of misunderstand what that means. And what it means is actually in the contract. The only thing that matters is what is written in the contract. It doesn't matter what anybody says. Emails going back and forth, text, none of that matters. The contract overrides everything. Now, the only thing that can change this contract is an addendum to the contract, and that's outside the scope of what we're talking about right now. But what it says in these 12 pages goes, always. When somebody goes under contract to purchase a house, there's what's known as a inspection period. It's also called a right of refusal period. Now, during that time, the buyer can have inspections done, have it looked over, and if anything comes up that's unacceptable, they can give written notice, say, look, nobody knew about this particular issue. I'm not good with it. We're going to cancel the contract. They'll get their deposit back, and everybody goes their separate ways. That's one thing that can happen. But what's more common is that during the inspection, some things will come up, and they always do. There are always things wrong with a house. But there might be some things that are important that nobody knew about. So, for example, I'll use an electrical issue as an example. So let's just say in my example scenario, the home inspector comes back and says, hey, we found some electrical issues in the panel. This is going to be an issue for you getting insurance. You may want to have a licensed electrical contractor take a look at this and evaluate it further. So in that case, the buyer should have a licensed electrical contractor come in and take a look at it. And that electrical contractor, of course, they have more expertise in that area than the home inspector does, so it's kind of like getting a second opinion. The contractor will look it over, evaluate it, and also give the buyer an idea of what it would cost to fix it. So then during this inspection period, the buyer can cancel the contract, fair and square, and again, what it means is exactly what it says in the contract. I'll just read it to you. The inspection period thing is on page 5 of the FAR contract, and it says, among other things, if the buyer determines in the buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract. And of course, that has to be done prior to the expiration of the inspection period. So, plain simple English. So if it's unacceptable, they can cancel. But what usually happens is they still want to buy the property. It's just the issue needs to be fixed. So sticking with this electrical issue, they may come back to the seller's agent and say, hey, look, we found this issue, this electrical issue. It's going to be an insurance problem for the buyer. Have the seller fix it before closing, and we're good. And that gives them an opportunity. The buyer can ask for the repair to be made. And then the seller, of course, they have a right to say no, in which case they would either cancel the contract or accept it as is. But in most cases, as long as it's a reasonable request, it's a good idea for the seller to just fix it. Because if they don't and they cancel, the issue's going to come up again with the next inspection. And plus, now that they know about it, it has to be disclosed in the property disclosures. So that's one issue. Now, sometimes some things will come up in the inspection, and the buyer, it may be okay, but they didn't know about these things in advance, so they feel that makes the house worth a little bit less. So they may want to renegotiate a price, and usually that's done as a credit at closing, or they may just change the purchase price of the property. Now, that's usually where sellers kind of get a little bit upset, because now all of a sudden it feels like, well, we're going through a whole second negotiation. And truly you are at that point, because they put an offer in on the house, then some issues came up they didn't know about, and it's a negotiation time again. And this is where having a realtor who's an expert in negotiation really comes into play, because there's a lot of conversation that goes on between realtors behind the scenes about what's reasonable to expect and what isn't. And usually it's been my experience, especially lately, where buyers will make unreasonable requests and then use it as an occasion to try and negotiate the price down lower. So that's where having a really good realtor like Pat and I is very, very valuable. I'll give you an example. There was a house just recently. The inspector said that it had galvanized pipe in the house. Galvanized pipe's bad. Insurance companies don't like it. The problem is it rusts from the inside out, so you can't tell if it's going to fail or not. Well, they wanted $10,000 off the price of the property because of that. We had our own plumber come in and take a look at it, independent of their plumber. We busted some holes in the walls to really inspect it and found out, well, it didn't have galvanized pipe. It had copper pipe, which was perfectly fine, and the little elbows where it came out of the wall were galvanized. So that's perfectly fine. So the seller saved $10,000 there because we took the time to do a little additional inspection. This inspection time, that's really where the bulk of the work gets done by a realtor. So anyway, let's get back on the contract. So as is, again, it matters what it says in the contract. And on page 11 of the contract, it says exactly what it means. And I'll just read it to you. Buyer waiver of claims. And then it goes on to explain that once this contract's done, that's it. There's no guarantees of any kind. The buyer can't come back later, unless it's within the bounds of the law, of course, and make any claims. And those kind of claims would be things that they'd have to prove that the seller knew that this was a defect and didn't disclose it. When a house goes under contract, there's a period of time where inspections can be done. If the inspections reveal anything bad, and they usually do, the buyer can either accept the house, they can cancel the contract, or they can ask for repairs or for a different price on the property. And those are all three things that they have every right to ask for. And of course, the seller has a right to refuse to do repairs, and they also have a right to refuse to do any kind of price changes. But in either case, the buyer always has the right to cancel. So I hope this kind of sheds some light on all this for you. I know we kind of went over a lot of stuff. If you have any questions, or if you want to know anything, give us a call. We'll tell you anything you want to know. We put humans over houses, and we're here to help you. And of course, if you're thinking about moving, or you know somebody who is, Pat and I would really love to talk with them. So thank you so much for watching. Put your comments and questions down below, or contact us directly. My phone number's at the end. Thanks for watching.